Hello Internet, so nice to see you. I have a question for you guys.
The only thing I'll say is that there are certain pioneers of musical styles who I think did benefit from knowing zero theory. Chuck Schuldiner of Death wrote incredibly weird, chromatic, odd timing, yet somehow listenable music, and I do have to wonder if you learned theory first, if that would perhaps stifle his enormous creativity. I equate theory to tracking the foods you eat by counting calories. It's great. It's incredibly useful. However, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. It's a great thing to learn, don't get me wrong, but you'll forever see the fretboard or keyboard or whatever differently.
This is what I call the music theory bias. Meaning, every time we talk about music theory, somebody comes out with an example. Hey, this person did not learn music theory, and if they learn music theory, they will be unable to do what they do. First of all, how do you know that if somebody learned music theory, they would be worse? It's kind of curious. Everybody assumes that. But why? Why do we assume that? Do you guys have a long list of people that were great musicians before they knew theory, and then when they learned theory, they became horrible musicians? No, because we actually do have a long list of people who were mediocre or okay musician, or actually even horrible musician, then they studied theory, and then they became much better at what they do, and then they became famous, okay? And we can start from musicians from 300 years ago and make a long list, starting from Mozart, starting from Beethoven, starting from, I don't know, Tchaikovsky, to more modern musicians. We could go on and on and on. I'm not even starting making names, because half of them, people are gonna go like, this person never knew music theory, and then it always turns out this person actually learned music theory, okay? How do you know? Okay, now we have the example here of Chuck Schuldiner of Death. And by the way, I hope I'm pronouncing Chuck Schuldiner the right way, because I'm a Death fan, but I never know how to pronounce that last name. Okay, of course, we check Google for that.
Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck Schuldiner expressed apparently that he didn't care about music theory. And so this seems to clinch it, right? This seems to stamp it. This guy did not know music theory. But here's what you find out if you dig a little bit. And with dig a little bit, I mean read the Wikipedia page until the end.
Schuldiner was mostly self-taught as a guitarist. In 1993, he expressed his disinterest in music theory. I know enough about what I'm playing to memorize the scales and things, but I have no idea what you would label them. As long as I can play it, memorize it, and apply it, I don't need to know what you call it.
Again, this seems to clinch it, right? But no. Listen exactly to what he was saying.
I know enough about what I'm playing to memorize the scales and things, but I have no idea what you would label them.
I know enough about what I'm playing to memorize the scales and things. I know enough. Meaning, first, in one way or another, Chuck found out that something like scale existed. Guys, scales are music theory. Okay, whether you learn them by yourself or somebody teach them to you, okay, they have come from somewhere, okay? This is music theory. And he knew his way around those scales. He knew how things worked, to memorize the scales, and he knew how they worked. Okay, so he had a very good grasp of how music worked. Okay, we call that music theory. It's not academic music theory because, as he says in the second sentence,
but I have no idea what you would label them.
But I have no idea how you label them. So he had no idea about the jargon of music theory. So guys, let me put it this way. Let's say you learn to drive a car, okay? And then you never went to driving school, but you're not causing any incident and you respect all the rules of the road code. You stop at every intersection if the light is red. You stop at the stop sign. You give precedence to other people when you have to. But when somebody asks you, you tell them, yeah, no, I don't know anything about the road code, but every time the thingy there goes red, I stop. Well, do you really not know your road code? Do you really, you know how to drive, you know how to make the thing work, and you know how to not be dangerous. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, okay? Guys, go to your driver's school, make sure you know exactly what you're doing, but the moment you're doing all the right things, you know it. Even if you call it in a completely different way. Just because you don't use the name that people use today for something doesn't mean that you don't know it. If you know that this is a G major chord, great, but if you call this one the yellow chord, but you know that the yellow chord goes with the green chord and with the red chord, because you have all different names for this thing, you will still know your music theory. You just have different names for that. The jargon is not the music theory. The important point is to know how things work in any possible sense of the word, except for the academic jargon. Chuck Schuldiner knew his music theory. But let's say, again, to make a point, let's say that he knew zero music theory, and he was already a good musician. Again, I'm a fan. And was already a good musician, and an original one. And let's say at a certain point, we grab Chuck and we have him learn music theory. How would we know if we possibly goes better or worse? You can speculate, but your speculation is as good as mine. The only way to do that will be to take the entire universe, duplicate it. In one universe we leave Chuck as it was, in another universe we teach him music theory, and then we go back a few years later and we see what kind of music he wrote. Because it's not just a music theory, it's everything else. Everything interacts with everything, okay? You cannot just imagine, hey, if you knew music theory, it would be less creative because I don't know, because he wouldn't have any model to follow. But maybe if he knew music theory, he has some model to follow, he could have been more efficient in writing, and maybe he would have been more creative simply because it would have tried more things. But if he knew music theory, he would have been blocked by some model of thinking. But if he knew music theory, maybe he had more instrument and tools to do what he wanted. This is an endless speculation. There is no way to tell. The only way to tell is that we know a lot of musicians who learn music theory and were able to compose better music. But we don't know many musicians who were great and then they learned music theory and they got worse. Right? If you have examples, by all means, write me all the examples of people who were absolutely great original musicians and they learned music theory and this made them worse. Please do in the comment. I'm here, open to your suggestion. The internet can find at least an example of that, right? Write them in the comment. But more than that, there is another point here that is absolutely important, and it's that.
However, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it.
Who says that? If you learn your road code and you're driving your car, does this stop you to run a red light? From running a red light? I mean, come on. Can you run a red light if you really want to? If you really want to, can you run a red light? Of course you can. Again, not recommended. But can you break the road code any moment you want? You learn it. Of course you cannot unlearn it in the sense that you cannot pretend you never knew it. But you can still do whatever you want. And indeed, you are responsible to do whatever you want in the eyes of the law. For instance, you are responsible if you run a red light. They totally nail you for being responsible for that. Okay? But you can still do it. If you learn music theory, it's super easy to ignore it. Just don't do that. Or even better, just do the opposite. Once you see what other people have done, it's actually easier for you to be creative because you already know what roads were taken and you can take another one. Okay? It's really not that hard. Everything you learn, you cannot unlearn it maybe, but you can still ignore it and still do whatever else. If that's what it takes, if really, when you learn music theory, you find that all this stuff is really not helping you, this is still helping you because you can ignore it and you can go the complete opposite direction. Okay? Either it points the way positively or it points the way negatively. So it's still useful to learn. This debate can go on forever until somebody duplicate the universes, okay, and make an experiment with somebody. We are never going to end, but I am pretty confident that if you learn music theory, this is going to help you. And by the way, music theory is not a single block of thing. It's a set of tools. Learn the tools you need. As somebody, as me, learn the tools you need to make the music you want to make. Now, one tool that will help everybody, regardless, is to learn the notes on your fretboard, okay? Just knowing where the notes are, it's not going to restrict you, but it's going to make it much easier when you communicate with other people and when you learn new pieces, and also when you're composing melodies and riffs and chords, progression, all this kind of stuff. Okay? Now, learning the notes on the fretboard seems impossible at first. It's actually really easy if you do the right thing. So, I have a free ebook, completely free, link on the top right. You get this ebook, okay? You read it, or you follow the videos that come with that. you do those exercises for 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes for a few weeks. Please, no more than 5 minutes. Take it easy, okay? For a few weeks, and by the end of those few weeks, you know all the notes on your fretboard as if they are painted on top, okay? You can always ignore the notes. You can always play whatever you want. Nobody's stopping you to play the most strange chromatic stuff just because you want to, but knowing the notes help you finding your way around, and it increases your possibility. The possibilities that you have right now for composition, the creativity you have right now when you do not know music theory, is not going to diminish, is not going to get less. When you learn music theory, it can just increase, okay? Because music theory is not a set of rules of law, it's a set of tools that you can use. And with that, I'm leaving you. This is Tommaso Zilio on musictheoryforguitar.com, and until next time, enjoy!